The stars had always whispered their secrets to those who listened, but now, one by one, they were going silent. Across the vast stretch of the Milky Way, the ancient ones who had watched over the universe for eons had begun to fall silent, their once bright beacons flickering out as if snuffed by an unseen hand. In every corner of the galaxy, species older than humankind, whose civilizations had long passed their golden age, knew what was coming. They had seen it before. They had known this day would come. A cold, mechanical species from beyond the reaches of space, a name whispered in fear, had returned, the Ascendants. No one knew who they were. Not really. No one knew what they wanted or why they had set their sights on the galaxy. All anyone knew was that when the Ascendants came, worlds fell. Great empires turned to ash, and whole civilizations were wiped out without a second thought. But that was before. That was before Earth. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Earth wasn't ready for what was coming. The nations of the world were divided, struggling with their own problems, caught up in the daily grind of their own existence. They hadn't known the true meaning of survival, let alone the cost of intergalactic warfare. But one thing was clear to those who had been watching the stars. Earth was next on the list. The Ascendants had been wiping out every world in their path with cold precision, never leaving any trace of life behind. Their ships were invincible, their weapons unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It seemed as though the end had come, until the message arrived. At first, no one believed it. It was a signal, a brief transmission in a language that seemed to dance on the edge of comprehension. It wasn't the usual transmission of the Ascendants, who were cold and direct, like an iron fist closing around the throat of the universe. This was something different, something. Human Earth is not what you think it is. The message repeated itself over and over again, breaking through every barrier of communication, every encryption, until it reached every corner of Earth's information network. The authorities scrambled to understand, but nothing made sense. The message didn't just echo on frequencies. It echoed in the minds of everyone who heard it, settling in the corners of their subconscious. It was a voice, unlike any the human race had ever heard, yet somehow profoundly familiar. And that was only the beginning. The Ascendants, who had wiped out countless civilizations before, stopped in their tracks. The fleets that had been heading toward Earth, their vast armadas capable of crushing entire planets, paused in their march. The void of space seemed to shift as the Ascendants faltered, something darkly new settling into their cold, efficient minds. They had underestimated the Earth, the one planet in the galaxy that had, until now, remained largely untouched by galactic politics. A tiny, insignificant planet, barely known to the greater galactic powers, had suddenly become the center of attention. But there was something else, something more disturbing. The Ascendants weren't the only ones listening. Others were coming. They didn't look like the Ascendants. They didn't even look like anything anyone on Earth could recognize. But their presence was undeniable. A powerful, unseen force was moving closer, gathering in the deep expanse of space, pulling at the very fabric of the stars. Earth wasn't just a blip in the galaxy anymore. It was a key to something much larger, something no one could have ever anticipated. The message had been sent, and the universe was listening. The Ascendants weren't the only ones with plans for Earth. The galaxy's oldest races, its most powerful entities, were watching. Each had their own reason, their own stake in the outcome. The balance of power in the galaxy was on the verge of tipping, and Earth, the planet once overlooked, was at the center of it all. But the message was more than a warning. It was a promise that humanity, for all its flaws and contradictions, wasn't going to fade away without a fight. The Ascendants had come to Earth, thinking they would conquer it like all the others before it. But they hadn't counted on one thing: the humans. They hadn't counted on the way humans could surprise you. how they could rally together against impossible odds, how they could rise when all hope seemed lost. They hadn't counted on the unyielding spark of defiance that ran through the veins of every human, no matter where they came from, no matter their past. The Ascendants had underestimated the greatest weapon the galaxy had ever known: the will to survive. For years, Earth had been isolated from the rest of the galaxy, its inhabitants unaware of the struggles that had taken place among the stars. But now, Earth was thrust into the heart of the galactic struggle. And it wasn't just humanity that would be tested, it was the very concept of what it meant to be human. Would humanity bow before the cold, relentless force of the Ascendants? Or would they rise and fight, proving that they had more to offer the galaxy than anyone had ever imagined? The first true battle of this war didn't happen in the vacuum of space or on the alien worlds that had once been thriving civilizations. It happened here, on Earth. A single spark was all it took, a single message to set the stage for something much larger. The galaxy was about to learn what humans were capable of when they had no choice but to survive. But even as the first signs of resistance began to stir, a dark, ominous truth hung in the air. The Ascendants may have been halted, but the galaxy was watching. The unknown forces that had been drawn to Earth were closer than anyone realized. And they weren't all friendly, as humanity scrambled to understand their new place in the universe. One thing became clear: Earth's fight for survival had only just begun. No longer would they be the planet lost in the shadows of the stars. No longer would they be ignored. The universe was about to tremble, and humanity would make sure it knew their name. The Ascendants, once so sure of their victory, now found themselves facing an enemy they hadn't prepared for, a race willing to fight back. But were they ready for what was to come next? Were they ready for the galaxy's true response? The transmission ended abruptly, leaving behind a deafening silence. The message was over, but the battle had just begun. The silence after the transmission felt heavier than sound. It hung in the air like a weight everyone could feel, but no one could name. People across the world stood frozen, staring at their screens, at their radios, at the sky itself, as if expecting the clouds to tear apart and reveal the truth that had been hidden from them all this time. Governments scrambled. Scientists argued. News channels kept repeating the same clips, the same words, the same questions that no one had answers for. But underneath all that noise, there was a quieter panic, growing, something deeper, something human. If the Ascendants had really paused their march toward Earth, then why? What did the message mean? And who had sent it? It didn't take long before the rumors began. Some believed it was a trick, a trap to lower Earth's guard. Others thought it was an old human experiment, some long-buried project resurfacing with terrible timing. A few whispered that it wasn't human at all, that something else had reached out from the dark and used humanity's own voice against them. But those who had seen the real data, the scientists who had watched the wave of that strange signal ripple through space, knew something far stranger was happening. In a small research facility buried beneath layers of mountains and rock, a group of analysts sat around a massive projection, replaying the message again and again. The voice was human, yes, but it wasn't from Earth. The tone, the cadence, the faint distortion that clung to the edges of the signal. It felt like someone had spoken across a distance far greater than any human technology could reach. And there was another detail, one that chilled the room every time it came up. The signal didn't originate from any known star system. It had come from nowhere, a point in space that shouldn't have existed. A void someone or something had spoken from the dark between galaxies, and for a reason none of them understood. It had chosen Earth, outside that facility. Across continents, the military was already preparing. Satellites were repositioned. Defense systems were upgraded. Old projects long thought abandoned were dragged out of storage and dusted off, including a few that had been considered too risky to ever deploy. The world was preparing for war, unsure if that preparation would make any difference. Humanity didn't have interstellar fleets or weapons that could shatter planets, but they had hope and desperation, and sometimes that was enough. Across the ocean, in a crowded city filled with lights that never slept, a group of astronomers stood on the roof of their observatory, staring at a cluster of stars that had recently begun to flicker. Those stars belonged to civilizations that had stood long before humans had even discovered fire. And now, one by one, they were going dark. The astronomers had seen patterns in the fading patterns that matched the ascendant's path. But now those patterns were shifting. The pause caused by the mysterious message had changed something in the larger cosmic map. It was as if the galaxy itself was rearranging around Earth, as though something had chosen this world as a new center. But why Earth? Why now? One of the astronomers noticed something strange while reviewing older data. For years, faint distortions had been recorded around the solar system. Tiny ripples in space that had been dismissed as equipment errors. But when examined closely, those distortions matched similar ripples around ancient, powerful worlds that the galaxy's elder species had once considered sacred or dangerous. It was a frightening thought. Earth wasn't just another planet in the galaxy. Not anymore. Something about it had changed. Or maybe something had been hidden here all along. Meanwhile, the Ascendants weren't idle. Even though their main fleet had stopped, countless smaller drones and probes drifted closer to the edge of the solar system, studying, observing, calculating. The Ascendants didn't understand fear or hesitation, but they understood strategy. And whatever the message had been, whatever force had sent it, had forced them to reevaluate. Inside one of their colossal warships, things so vast it cast shadows over moons, the Ascendant core processed the message with cold precision. The voice was unfamiliar. The pattern was unfamiliar. The meaning was unclear. But one detail made the entire race hesitate. The message contained an echo of something the Ascendants had encountered long ago in the distant corners of another galaxy. Something they had feared, not a weapon, not an empire, a presence. One that had vanished before the Ascendants rose to power. One that had once warned them of limits they were never meant to cross. And now, that same presence had spoken from Earth's direction. The Ascendants' cold logic faltered. If the presence had truly returned, Earth was not to be touched, not until they understood why. Back on Earth, life carried on in tense suspense. People stocked up on supplies. Some prayed. Some protested. Some simply tried to pretend that everything was normal. But the skies betrayed the truth. New stars appeared where there had been none before, small flashes of impossible light that faded just as quickly. Strange shapes were spotted near orbit, always slipping out of sight before any satellite could capture them clearly. Humanity wasn't alone anymore. It's not in the way they had always imagined. The galaxy was watching. Every major power, every hidden force, every ancient being was now turning its gaze toward Earth. And somewhere in the middle of this growing storm, a small team of specialists gathered in a meeting room deep underground. They had been chosen not just for their skills, but for their willingness to understand something far beyond the normal boundaries of science and logic. Their job wasn't to build weapons. Their job was to make sense of the message. One of them, a quiet researcher with a habit of staring too long at star maps, pointed out a detail no one else had noticed. The message wasn't simply a warning. It was a pattern, a code. And within that pattern was a map. Not a map of the galaxy, but a map of something older. Something beneath Earth itself. It made no sense. But there it was, design hidden in the cadence of the message, a shape repeated dozens of times. No one recognized it immediately, but the more they studied it, The more an uneasy truth sank in. It wasn't a message about where the sender was. It was a message about what Earth already had. Something buried. Something sealed away long before humans existed. Something that the Ascendants feared. And something else feared even more as the research team debated the implications. A tremor shook the facility, faint but unmistakable. It wasn't an earthquake. It came from above, from the sky. Outside, the clouds swirled unnaturally, shadows twisting as though something moved behind them. People stopped in the streets. Animals fell silent. For a brief, breathless moment, the entire planet seemed to hold still. Then the alerts began, unidentified. Objects entering the solar system, not the Ascendants, not human, something else, something. Ancient dot, something moving too fast to track, and too quietly to detect until it was already close. Panic rippled through every control room on Earth. The message had opened the door. And now something had stepped through it. The world braced itself, holding on to the last fragile strands of hope. But the truth was simple and terrifying. The real conflict hadn't even begun yet, and whatever was coming, it wasn't here for peace. The objects that entered the solar system were silent to silent. They didn't emit energy in any spectrum humans could track, yet they moved with purpose, gliding past planets and moons as though they had memorized every inch of the system long before humanity ever appeared. Observatories tried to lock onto them, but the sensors flickered, jammed, then rebooted without explanation. No debris, no radiation, no engine signature. It was like the newcomers were made of nothing at all, but they were there. The first confirmed sighting came from a deep space watch station orbiting far beyond the moon. The crew managed to get a brief visual through manual telescopes, just shapes, faint outlines, drifting like shadows across the stars. The description they sent back was inconsistent and unsettling. Some claimed the objects looked like shards of stone, broken pieces of a larger whole. Others said they resembled vast, curved wings. One officer insisted he saw an I-1 enormous, eye staring back at him before vanishing behind a blink of darkness, minutes after the report was sent. The station went offline. No explosion. No distress call. It simply faded from existence, leaving behind only static. The silence that followed spread fear faster than any announcement could. Humanity was caught between two forces it didn't understand. The Ascendants, cold and relentless, and these new arrivals, whatever they were. And somewhere beneath their feet, buried deep in the earth, was something even older. Governments worldwide initiated lockdown protocols, though they tried to mask it as temporary safety measures. Flights were grounded. Communications were slowed. Military forces moved quietly across borders. People felt the shift without needing news to tell them. Something was coming. And humanity was walking blind toward it, while global powers struggled to stay calm. The small research team that discovered the hidden map within the message continued their work. The shape embedded in the transmission and intricate pattern of intersecting lines seemed to pulse. Like a heartbeat, the more they studied it. It didn't look like any earthly formation. It resembled a structure or a container. They ran simulations using Earth's geology, trying to match the pattern with any natural formation. The results were chilling. The pattern aligned with a massive region beneath the ocean floor, far deeper than the oldest continental plates. The supercomputers highlighted it in bright red, an anomaly more ancient than life itself. Something had been placed there, something that shouldn't exist. Further analysis revealed faint energy signatures coming from the region's signals that matched the same strange frequency embedded in the message. That meant one thing. The message wasn't only a warning. It was a key, somewhere deep beneath the ocean. Something was awakening, while the researchers debated their next steps. Thousands of miles away, a different kind of storm was forming. A lone cargo ship sailing across a quiet stretch of ocean radioed a report of unusual waves, sharp, unnatural oscillations not caused by wind or tide. The crew swore they saw the water pull downward in a slow spiral, as though something beneath the surface were inhaling. The radio transmission cut off with a sharp crack, followed by a series of distorted clicks. The ship was never heard from again. Across the world, these incidents began piling up. Deep-sea sensors malfunctioned. Animals migrated in odd patterns. Satellites blinked out and returned, flickering like dying candles. Scientists tried to rationalize each event, but the pattern was undeniable. The anomaly beneath Earth was reacting to something approaching from space. The research team briefed world leaders through secure channels, though many refused to believe what they were hearing. A buried construct older than human history was too much to accept. Yet the data couldn't be ignored. Seismic readings indicated subtle pulses from the ocean floor, rhythmic and deliberate. Something was trying to communicate. At the same time, the ascendants broke their eerie silence. Their fleet shifted position ever so slightly, forming a defensive boundary at the far edge of the solar system. They didn't advance, but they didn't retreat either. It was as though they were bracing themselves not for battle, but for confrontation with the newcomers for the first time in their existence. The ascendants hesitated. Inside their warship, the primary core replayed the message from Earth over and over. It had detected faint echoes hidden behind the words "codes" of a power that terrified even them. Whatever was buried beneath Earth was linked to that presence. And now, the unknown objects moving into the solar system seemed drawn to it. If the presence truly returned, the ascendants knew they would not survive. Meanwhile, the objects continued their silent approach, slipping past Jupiter, then Mars. They grew clearer as they neared Earth, dark, jagged forms that bent light around them, leaving faint trails like smudges in space. Every attempt to analyze them failed. Every reading came back empty, as if the objects existed halfway between reality and something else. Humanity watched from afar, breath held tight. Panic spread in slow waves. Some people fled cities, others locked themselves indoors. A strange calm settled over the world, the kind that comes before a storm hits in the middle of this global fear. A lone communications outpost in a desert region detected a transmission, not from the ascendants, not from the mysterious newcomers, from beneath the ocean floor. The signal was faint, almost like a whisper. No human language, no known pattern, but the tone carried something familiar, something that matched. The faint echo hidden within the original warning, sent across the galaxy. If the message truly came from whatever had been, buried deep beneath Earth since before humanity existed, then the implications were overwhelming. Humanity was not just being threatened from the outside. They were sitting on top of something that might be even more dangerous. The research team replayed the recording in the dim light of their underground lab. The room held the weight of dread so thick it felt physical. Each strange tone, each unnerving vibration from the signal made the air feel colder. They had to tell the world. But how do you explain that Earth held something inside it that might have been feared by civilizations long vanished? Something powerful enough to make the ascendants hesitate. Another report came in before they could decide what to do. Several coastal sensors detected sudden shifts in ocean currents. Not natural, not weather-related. The shifts lined up perfectly with the buried anomaly. It was waking up faster at the same time. The objects in space made their first noticeable move. They formed a loose formation, slowing as they approached Earth's orbit. For a moment, it looked like they might make contact. But instead, they simply hovered, aligning themselves in a circular pattern around the planet. As though positioning for something, the Ascendants reacted instantly. Their distant fleet brightened with the activation of energy shields, preparing for a confrontation. But before they could act, the newcomers released a single pulsa-silent wave that rippled across the solar system. Satellites flickered. Sensors shorted out. Every electronic device on Earth stuttered for a heartbeat. Then, in the middle of the blackout, a new message appeared on screens across the world. It wasn't from Earth. It wasn't from the ASCNDANTS. It was from the newcomers. A simple phrase. Written in imperfect but decipherable human language. "We are here for what sleeps beneath you." The message vanished as quickly as it appeared. People everywhere stared in disbelief. The governments panicked. Scientists tried desperately to decode it. But the meaning was painfully clear. The newcomers weren't here to help Earth. They weren't here to fight the Ascendants. At least not for humanity's sake. They wanted whatever was buried beneath the low ocean floor, and they were willing to take it far below the planet's surface. The anomaly pulsed again, stronger this time. The ocean trembled. The ground shook. And for the first time since the beginning of human history, something ancient stirred beneath the crust, something that had slept through the rise and fall of galaxies. Humanity was no longer simply in danger. They were standing on top of the very thing everyone else feared, and the galaxy's eyes were all watching, waiting, preparing. The storm was finally breaking, and Earth was trapped at its center. The pulse from beneath the ocean floor didn't stop. It grew steadier, stronger, like a heartbeat rising toward wakefulness. All around the world, seismic sensors began to catch an ancient rhythmic thrum that didn't belong to any natural formation. It echoed through the water, through the crust, through the bones of the Earth itself. People didn't need announcements or experts to tell them something was terribly wrong. They could feel it. Birds grew restless. Dogs barked at empty corners. The air seemed heavier, as if the planet were holding its breath. Meanwhile, the newcomers, those dark, jagged shapes waiting silently beyond Earth's atmosphere, tightened their formation. They hovered in a perfect ring around the planet, not attacking, not communicating, but watching. They were like hunters waiting for a creature to emerge from its hiding place. Humanity wasn't their concern. Earth's cities, its people, its fears meant nothing to them. Their eyes, if they even had eyes, were fixed on the ocean, on the buried anomaly that pulsed as though in response to their presence. And far beyond them, at the edge of the solar system, the Ascendants shifted again. Their colossal ships hummed with growing tension. They activated weapons that had not been used since the fall of star empires long forgotten. Arc-like fields crackled around their hulls, casting eerie light across the darkness of space. They didn't move closer, but their hesitation was fading. Whatever slept beneath Earth could not be allowed to awaken in their cold, efficient minds. There was only one possible solution. If the anomaly rose to the surface, Earth would be destroyed. Inside an underground facility, the research team studied the ever-growing energy spikes with grim faces. They replayed the newcomer's message, "We are here for what sleeps beneath you," over and over again, as if somehow the meaning might change on the 100th listen. It didn't. Some of the team members argued that they should warn the world of what was coming. Others insisted the truth would only start a global panic that no one could contain. But it hardly mattered now. The anomaly beneath the sea didn't care whether humanity understood. It was waking up. On the other side of the world, aboard a military observation plane flying over the oceanic region where the anomaly was buried. The crew watched something impossible on their monitors. The water temperature spiked suddenly, rising by several degrees in seconds. The ocean surface churned in slow spirals, the waves forming patterns too geometric to be natural. Beneath it all, the dark shape of something massive began to appear on radar too big to be a mountain. too structured to be stone. When the plane dipped lower for a closer view, the sky rippled, not cloud space. For a moment, the whole horizon bent as if reality itself had been pulled like rubber. Then a beam of faint light flickered from one of the newcomer's shapes and scanned the water, reacting instantly as the anomaly stirred. The plane's instruments went dead. The engines sputtered. Alarms blared. The pilot pulled up with everything he had, fighting the sudden gravity-like drag pulling toward the ocean. They barely made it back to stable air. When the crew looked back, the ocean's surface had gone still again, as if nothing had happened. But they had seen it. Something beneath the waves had moved, far from the ocean. In a crowded city full of neon lights, people stopped in the streets as every screen from giant billboards to small phones glitched at the same time. A blurred image appeared, trembling with static. It showed swirling darkness and faint symbols that resembled the pattern hidden in the original warning. Then came a distorted sound, not quite a voice, but close enough to feel like one. A low, resonant tone washed over the city, vibrating through glass and metal. People covered their ears. Some fell to their knees. Babies cried. Animals shrieked. Then everything blinked off. In the sudden silence, fear settled like dust. Governments across the world scrambled to understand what was coming. Military forces gathered near coastlines. Submarines were dispatched to scan the ocean depths, though most of their systems failed within minutes. Satellites were repositioned, though their signals flickered in and out as the energy surges grew stronger. Leaders held emergency meetings, debating whether to contact the ascendants despite the risk. But no one could agree on anything, because no one truly understood what was happening. And all the while, the newcomers tightened their ring around Earth, inside their massive warships. The ascendants analyzed each new pulse rising from beneath the ocean. They detected patterns that matched ancient warnings found in the ruins of civilizations they had long ago erased. Symbols, frequencies, names, etched into stone by species that no longer existed. It was all connected to the same forbidden presence. Nay, nay, nay. Nay, 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 nay. Nay, nay, they convicted presence. Nay, nay, they call with presides. Nay, 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 nay. Nay, 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 subjective. Nay, my mekend, nay, to seld, by my gabade, eb. Nay, conted, the sad of canned, to me make it to kabig sai kit to me ned. With it, kasirik, by clatus it a sectic die to bit as I gun it spent to be others wisp is it entity the ascendants had once vowed never to encounter again. Yet here it was, beneath Earth, waking. The ascendants finally made their decision. Their fleet angled slightly toward the inner solar system. Weapons hummed. Massive cannons charged with a cold electric glow. They couldn't wait any longer. If the newcomer succeeded in breaking open the anomaly, it would be too late. But the newcomers sensed the shift instantly. Their circle formation brightened with a silent pulse, as if answering a challenge. They drifted closer to Earth, closing the space between them and the planet's atmosphere. They weren't preparing to fight humanity. They were preparing to fight the ascendants, caught in between. Humanity waited helplessly at the research facility. The team finally decoded the faint whispering signal from beneath the ocean floor. It wasn't language, not in the way humans understood it. It was a sequence of memories. A warning wrapped in echoes of countless extinct civilizations. The anomaly wasn't just ancient. It was older than the galaxy itself. It had moved through countless worlds before Earth, each time leaving behind only ruins and silence. It was not a weapon. It was something alive, something contained. And now, After millions of years, it sensed the forces gathering above. It was responding. The team didn't know whether the pulses were a sign of fear, hunger, or something else entirely. They didn't know if the anomaly was friend or foe. All they knew was that it was waking faster than anyone expected. They tried to warn world leaders, but the global communication network was failing. Strange static appeared on every channel, like someone or something was interfering. The static had a rhythm, a pattern, the same heartbeat rising from beneath the sea. Across the world, the skies darkened in unnatural streaks, not cloud shadows. Thin lines of darkness cut through the atmosphere like cracks in glass. They flickered, widened, and then snapped shut again. People panicked as power grids flickered and lights pulsed. Strange vibrations hummed through metal structures. Drones fell from the sky. The planet felt alive in a way that terrified everyone. Above the chaos, the newcomers descended lower. The ascendants prepared to fire. The ocean swelled, forming a massive spiral visible from space. The pressure beneath the water surged beyond anything recorded before, and then something broke through. A beam of deep, radiant light shot out from the ocean, piercing the sky. It wasn't liquid. It wasn't smoke. It was something entirely new, something that pulsed with the same ancient rhythm embedded in the message that had stopped the ascendants in the first place. The beam reached upward, touching the ring of newcomers. They reacted instantly, their formation tightening like a closing fist. The ascendants readied their weapons with frantic precision. The beam flickered. The ocean trembled. The sky tore slightly along the edges of space. Humanity watched, breathless. As the world stood on the knife edge between three forces, none of which it understood. And then, from beneath the ocean, something enormous began to rise. The water parted. The light grew. The pulse thundered through every heart on the planet. Something older than every star in the night sky was awakening, and Earth was moments away from learning whether that awakening meant salvation or complete destruction. The ocean split open with a sound no human ear had ever heard before. A deep and ancient rumble that felt more like the earth itself speaking. Water tore upward in twisting towers as the light from below grew brighter, climbing into the sky like a pillar meant to hold up the heavens. People everywhere stared at live broadcasts, cities frozen, streets silent as something impossibly large rose from the depths. At first, it didn't have a shape the mind could understand. It was like trying to look at a memory you didn't know you had, or a dream that slipped away the moment you tried to hold on to it. But as it ascended, the light softened and the shape grew clearer. Massive, curved surfaces gleamed like smooth stone, etched with patterns that resembled the strange symbols from the original message. Whatever the object was, it wasn't a creature in the way humans understood life. It wasn't a machine either. It was something in between alive, aware, and older than anything recorded in the galaxy. The newcomers reacted instantly. Their formation tightened, beams of energy flickering across their surfaces like nervous anticipation. They moved first, drifting downward toward the rising structure as if answering a call that only they could hear. One by one, their dark shapes connected to the glowing form rising from the ocean, attaching themselves along its sides like shards, returning to a broken shell. The research team watching the event unfold understood then. Newcomers weren't here to destroy the anomaly. They were part of it, pieces of a whole. Pieces left scattered across the galaxy ages ago. They had returned to complete what they had lost, but the ascendants did not share that peaceful purpose. The waking presence, this ancient construct, was the very thing they had feared for generations. The one force that had warned them long ago about the limits they had ignored. To them, this awakening meant the possible end of their reign and everything they had built. The ascendants' fleet lit up like a constellation of steel stars. their weapons charged to full power, humming with a finality that echoed across space. They were preparing to obliterate Earth, the anomaly, the newcomers, everything, even if it meant sacrificing the planet entirely. They believed it was the only way to stop the presence from restoring itself. Earth held its breath, and then the rising structure responded, from deep within its core. A pulse of soft light expanded outward. It wasn't an attack. It wasn't a defense. It was simply a message, one meant for every species watching, one spoken without words. The pulse resonated across oceans, continents, orbit, and even through the cold void where the ascendant fleet hovered. The world went still. In that silent moment, every mind, human, ascendant, newcomer felt something like memory. Not a specific picture or sound, but a sense of what had come before. A galaxy newly formed. Civilizations rising and falling like sparks in a dark room. A warning from a time so distant it had no number. The presence had not been buried to protect itself. It had buried itself to protect the galaxy from the wars its power once ignited. It had hidden so others could grow, so life could flourish on worlds like Earth. But now, with the Ascendants destroying world after world, and the galaxy trembling under their rule, it had awakened to restore the balance. The newcomers, born from fragments of this ancient being, had returned to help it rise again. The Ascendants panicked. Their fleet shifted into attack formation. Beams charged, ready to fire. Earth's leaders, powerless in the face of forces so far beyond them, waited for the moment that might erase everything. But before the Ascendants could strike, the ancient presence reacted again. A second pulse, brighter, stronger, expanded outward like a wave of warm sunlight. Instead of burning or destroying, it simply passed through matter. Through ships, through oceans, through the atmosphere, through every living being. Where the pulse touched the Ascendant fleet, their weapons flickered and died. Their power sources dimmed. Their metallic forms, so harsh and unyielding, softened and folded inward like dark petals caught in a breeze. They weren't destroyed, they were disarmed. Their cold programming, which had driven them to wipe out countless civilizations, faded as though soothed by something older than fear. The Ascendants had been silenced by the same presence they had once tried to defy. As the pulse faded, the ocean calmed. The towering structure hovering above the water glowed softer now, no longer bright enough to blind. The newcomers detached from it gently, spreading out into a loose, peaceful pattern. They weren't preparing for battle anymore. They were helping stabilize the presence that had finally awakened after its long sleep all around the world. Humanity watched in stunned silence. The galaxy had nearly torn Earth apart, and instead, something miraculous had unfolded. The danger was gone. The Ascendants, stripped of their ability to wage war, drifted quietly at the edge of the solar system like giants suddenly unsure of their own strength. A new transmission echoed across human devices. No distortion, no fear. Just clarity. It came from the ancient presence. In simple human words, it said, "Be still. You were never the enemy. You were the hope." The message rippled across the globe, leaving people crying, laughing, trembling without understanding why. The presence wasn't claiming Earth. It wasn't preparing to stay. It was leaving. Slowly, gently, the colossal structure began to lift higher into the sky. The newcomers gathered around it, forming a protective sphere. In a beam of shimmering light that stretched beyond the atmosphere, they rose together, drifting away from Earth and into the deep quiet of space. They left no destruction behind, only a faint glow on the horizon that faded like the last trace of a dream as they disappeared beyond human sight. The sky cleared. The world exhaled. The threat was gone. Earth was spared. Humanity had survived something that countless species before them hadn't, and they hadn't done it by force or technology or war. They had simply endured long enough for the truth to awaken long enough for the galaxy to remember why Earth mattered in the days that followed. Scientists studied the after-effects of the presence's pulse. The planet felt lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted from its core. The oceans settled. The strange shadows in the sky vanished. New communication patterns from distant sectors hinted that other worlds long silenced by the ascendants were beginning to recover. Humanity had been pulled into the center of a conflict far larger than itself and had emerged, not defeated. But Change.News Network spoke of unity like it was something fragile but possible. Countries reached out to one another with new cooperation, driven by the knowledge that Earth was more than just a lonely planet. It was a place that had been chosen, protected, valued. Then the research team continued to decode what remained of the ancient messages. They found no threats, no warnings, only a lingering promise that echoed softly in the data. When the galaxy trembles again, Earth will not stand alone. People looked up at the night sky with a different kind of wonder. Not fear, not confusion, but understanding. Humanity had been seen by the universe, not as prey, not as a mistake, but as something worth saving. One quiet night, as the last ripple of the event faded from the world, a small message appeared on a lone observatory screen. No alarm triggered. No system crashed. It was simple, almost gentle. Remember why you were spared. No one ever figured out who sent it, but humanity remembered. And as Earth healed and the galaxy slowly restored its balance, one truth settled into the hearts of everyone who had lived through the event. The universe was bigger and older and stranger than they ever imagined, but for the first time, humanity felt like it truly belonged in it.